our next guest is a lawyer who on August 21st will be aiming to be elected as the new member for Melbourne. Please welcome the Greens candidate for Melbourne, Mr. Adam Bandt. Adam, welcome. Thanks so much for coming on. How are you?
Very well.
That's good, that's good. Now, firstly, I think it's a good thing to point out that this is the only marginal seat in the country between, well, Labor and the Greens.
The Greens, that's right. Yeah, it ran last time and we turned it into the only seat in the country that's like that. And it's so close that if 1 in 10 people who voted Labor last time vote Greens this time, we win our first ever seat at a general election.
And Lindsay Tanner's out, so they've got some newbie stepping up.
That's right.
This is going to be a shoo-in.
No, not at all. I mean, it's going to be pretty close. Voting Greens is a pretty big step for people to do for the first time, for many people. But we're in with a pretty good shot. I mean, I'm getting people coming up pretty much every day now saying that they've been voting Labor for 10, 20 years and just can't bring themselves to do it again.
Which is great. I think it's also important to point out at this stage, I didn't really realise until I started doing a bit more research, the Greens have actually never held a seat in the lower house. Yeah,
that's right. I mean, at a general election, we never elected people to the Senate, obviously, Bob Brown and so on. But we had one once at a by-election, and that lasted for about a year, and then the natural order returned after the general election, but this would be the first time.
Great, great. Now, so in terms of Melbourne, I mean, I've voted twice before in my life, so I'd like to consider myself somewhat of an expert. But in terms of Melbourne, what are some of the kind of key issues?
Well, it's a pretty good inner city electorate, and so it basically covers from sort of Kensington, all the Fitzroy, Carlton, out to Richmond. So some pretty interesting, diverse areas. And in one of the sort of big picture things, I think, is climate change. A lot of people are pretty disappointed with the lack of action on climate change, and so that's kind of right up there. Yeah. And treatment of asylum seekers. I mean, everyone's pretty perplexed about why a few thousand boat people in a total immigration intake of 200,000-300,000 are getting such massive attention nationally, and a lot of people really want a more compassionate treatment for boat people.
It does seem like a very hardline policy. Have they taken something that's essentially not a big issue and not, excuse the pun, but blown it out of the water?
Yeah, well, if you look at think about this electorate of Melbourne, right? Look at Chinatown, look at Victoria Street over in Richmond, look at Lygon Street in Carlton. If we had this policy all the time, Melbourne would be a pretty dreary place to live. And in the years after the Vietnam War, we took in 100,000 people across the country. Yeah. There was a more compassionate approach that the parties agreed on, and they decided not to play politics with it. I think they're just going for the lowest common denominator. And I mean, the whole election is being conducted as if the only people that matter are a handful of voters in marginal seats in outer Queensland and New South Wales. And so the whole of the nation's political discussion is tailored towards them. And so key issues that are so important here in Melbourne, like compassion, sustainability, equality, same-sex marriage, for example, just aren't on the political radar. And if we win, we can really put them on the national landscape, change the political landscape.
When Julia Gillard came out and she said, although it wasn't her personal view about same-sex marriage, she felt it wasn't an issue that the society was ready for, were those comments just unnecessary? It seems like she didn't need to comment.
Look, every poll says 60-70% of people support it. Bob Brown went on The Circle the other day and said we need to change the laws to allow for same-sex marriage and got basically a standing ovation from the crowd. I think most people want it, but as I said, it's because everything is being tailored to these outer suburban marginal electorates, and as if they're the only people that matter, they're not going to show any kind of leadership. But I reckon if someone got up and made the case for it, you'd have the Australian population behind you pretty quickly.
Now, yourself, I've actually seen you speak a few times. I've seen you speak at the protest for the 2 a.m. lockout. I've seen you kind of around Melbourne. I feel like you are a very Melbourne person and you're very passionate about the things that make our city so great, such as live music, such as culture and things like this. Now, your main opponent, Kath Botel, I don't want to say she punches puppies in the face. So I'm not going to say that. But I don't really know her, and I don't feel like she's in touch with the city at all. Is that a fair thing to say?
Oh, look, Labor parties pick their candidate, they'll run their candidate, and I think at the end of the day it's a choice between two parties, and I mean, it's not what I think about her isn't really the issue, it's what other people think about her.
Okay, sure. Now, just to kind of go away from Melbourne and talk about the bigger picture of the election in general, who would you rather see as Prime Minister, Abbott or Gillard?
Well, we're suggesting in Melbourne that people preference Labor above Liberal, and that's what we're pretty much suggesting across the country. So I think you can draw a pretty clear inference from that I don't think Melbourne's ready for budgie smugglers just yet. Yeah.
I'm scared.
Yeah.
I'm personally scared.
Look, I think the recent polls say that 70% of people still think Labor's going to win the election, and I reckon that's what's going to happen. That's what the bookies say is going to happen. I reckon, maybe it's wishful thinking, but I reckon most people are going to get in the ballot box and realise that they don't want that man to be Prime Minister.
Okay. Now, I'm really hoping you win. I think you're refreshing. I think it's a great thing, and I hope you get the seat of Melbourne. My problem is I don't live in the seat of Melbourne. So if it gets to the election and I write my own box down the bottom of the form and put your name next to it and tick it, is that going to help?
Sadly not. Sadly not. It'll make me feel good, but I don't think it'll help.
Okay, now just lastly, before we go, Adam, there are a few things that I want to see happen in Melbourne. And I want to get your guarantee that if you're elected, you will make these happen.
All right.
Less windy days.
Ironclad, rock solid guarantee.
Locked in. Good, good. The ticket inspectors could have better manners.
They said, I agree. I think that's dead right.
Okay, that's going to locked in. Change the name of Melbourne to Awesome Town.
I think that's how we all know it already.
Okay, good, good, good. So even if that's not official, that's what we'll call it. And lastly, there was a really gorgeous girl on the tram today. So if you're elected, perhaps me and her could, date?
I'll get you a phone number.
Done deal! Ladies and gentlemen, please thank Adam Bandt.
Thank you. Thank you.